I always tell people I'm not to scale in photographs.
And you didn't bring your blue vest to
That's what she just said, yeah.
It's because I don't own vests. My arms get cold.
So from time to time, we answer questions. At different points in the year, folks write down questions for us, sometimes in services or new member gatherings, and we answer them. So with no preparation or knowledge ahead of time of what these are, here we go. Is there a difference regionally in Unitarian Universalism? I had the impression that UU folks in the western part of the United States were a little bit more woo-woo than others. So is there a difference regionally?
First of all, I love the phrase woo-woo. I always tell people there's a difference like from building to building in UU congregations. And I think every congregation is a little bit different, and that's why it's really, really good if you move to a new part of the country to visit all the congregations that are near you, because every community is going to interpret our shared values in a little bit of a different way, depending on not just the minister, but the whole staff and the community itself. So things are always going to look a bit different. I don't have to be the only one talking, but I'll also say that there are some, like generally speaking, especially in New England, there are some congregations that identify really strongly with that historical line of ministers who kind of were like, and you probably know the history better than me, were like the deans of the Harvard Divinity School, and were like that really strong, like 1800s historical. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up outside of Boston, and then served congregations in Minnesota and in Chicago and now here. And I don't know that things are any more woo in the West than they are anywhere else, but like the buildings are really different. Like the feeling that you get walking into a building from 1850 is really different from a building in 1960 something. And I think sometimes like folks bring associations with that. Sometimes things work in those buildings that don't work in these. Like nobody really builds churches with organs in them anymore. But if you've got a church with an organ in it, organs can be really old-fashioned, but they can also be like mind-blowingly amazing when they're played really well. Yes. So it's like, so sometimes I think there are pieces of the feeling of a place that feel older-fashioned, but I agree with you. I mean, I think the difference is so much more than just the like theology or spiritual practice too. I think like there's a difference in culture or expectation, and you know, the feeling you get in one church to the next between any two churches is going to be as big as it is between a church in the mountain time zone and the eastern time zone, I think.
And also,
I was just going to say, I have nothing to add to this conversation because this is the only UU congregation I've been a part of.
I was thinking
they're
that
all like this.
Well, and I'll also say I worked at Arlington Street Church, which is in Boston, like on Copley Square, which is like old, so old. And also, like, there was a woman in the congregation who dressed up like the Easter Bunny, like shout out to Queen Cheryl, and like would stand on the steps and blow bubbles. And also the bells in the tower were from the Paul Revere Foundry. Yeah. And like people would come from all over the country to visit the Arlington Street Church and like go up in the tower and ring the bells. So it's like both and like also there were like quotes from Thich Nhat Hanh, like painted in the bathroom. You know, so it, and like there were plenty of woo-woo people in that congregation. So it's sort of like all congregations, like we love everybody and we welcome everybody, and you kind of have to decide where you feel comfortable and where you feel like, oh, this is a place that I can make my spiritual home.
I also think I think Unitarian Universalism is more intentionally theologically plural than it was a generation or two ago. Like I think in the 60s and 70s, 80s, there was much more of a sense of like, this is a humanist church. This is a Unitarian Christian church. This is neither of those things. And there are still some of our congregations like that, but I feel like there's much more of an intentional theological pluralism in all of our communities than there might have been then.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Is there an opportunity at UUCB to discuss theology with others and learn about the various points of view represented in the congregation?
Why, yes.
Good, next question.
It's called Soul Matters. Small group discussions.
Yeah.
And also like coffee hour. And like, I don't know, wherever you are.
Yeah, and like Paula's once a month practical theology sessions, where it's more talking about the spiritual components of things rather than the theological, which I would say like spiritual is more heart-centered and theology is more up here. But through talking about someone's spirituality, you are going to get a sense of what their theology is. So that would be another place too.
Yeah, in those Soul Matter small groups, these days we do one set of those in the fall and one in the winter to the spring. You get together with 6 to 10 other folks to talk about how a particular monthly theme intersects with your own personal lived experience in theology and spirituality around that theme. And the idea is, like, unlike a sort of an intellectual discussion, debate sort of a thing, it's really a practice of deep listening and authentic sharing. So you really get to go deep quickly with folks that you may not know very well about what their experience is there. You mentioned to a friend about going to church on Sunday. They ask about what church. You say Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. They ask, I don't know about Unitarian Universalism. How do you answer succinctly in 1 or 2 sentences what Unitarian Universalism is, or what this place is about?
Oh.
I joke that we are the church of potlucks and protests. Which
That's awesome.
That's my like quick little answer. And then I also explained that Unitarianism and Universalism does not actually describe what we do now, that they're both Christian denominations that merged in the 60s and then at some point decided to like let go of the Christianity portion as being essential. And so now we're united by our values rather than by a creed. And so we don't have a set of shared beliefs, but we do have a set of shared values. And then I go through those values if the person seems like they have enough bandwidth to listen to more.
I start sort of where you landed off and say, like, rather than being united around a shared creed where we all believe the same things in the same way, we have a shared set of values, but plural theology where you may have Buddhists sitting next to atheists and agnostics and Christians and spiritual but not religious and on and on and on. And we get together to be in community together, in relationship with each other, to make those values real in our lives and to follow our own spiritual path, understanding that it's enriched in encounter with other people, with other paths, instead of diminished by that. Which is technically one sentence, but that's a long sentence.
You're a minister.
People are used to run-on sentences.
I guess. Well, you guys are really good at this. Sorry, I was listening to listen and not to answer, so I don't, let me think. I don't know, I'm kind of flippant in my personal life. So I generally say, well, and I also, like, because I'm a singing teacher and a musician, I'm usually around people who are, like, I'm usually around a lot of, like, artists and musicians. So I'm around a specific, like, subset of people most of the time. So usually I say, oh yeah, I work at a church, but it's like super queer affirming and like we're a Black Lives Matter church and like we're very much, we're gay marriage people, we're Black Lives Matter people, we're protest people, we're, No Kings people. My choir people wanted to know, do we have rehearsal that day? Because there's a protest that I want to go to. And so I talk a lot about that kind of stuff, more like what we do. And yeah, I will often say we're non-dogmatic, so people believe whatever they want to believe, and it's much more about seeking meaning in your life, and it's much more about who you are as a person and how you want to show up in the world than it is about you need to do this and follow these kinds of rules. So I talk a lot more about that because a lot of the people that I interact with in my life, and I think probably where this question is coming from too, have kind of very specific mental associations with what church in the United States means to, like, stereotypically. And so because I work with a lot of queer artists and people who, there are a lot of queer folks like in musical spaces. And so we kind of have a shared understanding that we're not going to be in spaces that aren't queer affirming, and we're not going to, associate ourselves with places that not everybody we love or care about is welcome or can be. And so I lead with that kind of language because I need people to know that I'm living my values even when I'm at this job. I'm not going to just like take a job and make money in a place and pretend that I don't care about the things that really matter to me. So I kind of frame it in a specific way because like having a church job as a musician is a thing that a lot of people do, but it's important to me to stress that working in a UU church is not just like a church job, but it's like something that really matters to me very deeply and is part of my identity, and is not just like a side hustle to make money, but it's like something that is deeply meaningful and part of who I am.
It makes me think too, like I think part of the way you answer the question sort of depends on who you're talking to. Like, are you trying to explain this to your cousin who grew up super Lutheran and is still very super Lutheran? Like the way that you sort of, have that conversation about here's how it's like your experience, here's how it's not like, might be really different than your friend who has never set foot in a religious community of any kind before and is like, what even happens on Sunday?
Right.
So that's a piece of it.
I also, in Boulder, clarify that we are not Unity Church on Folsom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So confusing.
So we'll do one more. How can our liberal community continue to thrive in an area where the cost of living is skyrocketing? People are migrating to places where the cost of living is manageable.
Ooh. That's a hard question.
Right? I mean, not to jump in, but I think a couple of things off the cuff. One is, this is not directly addressing the question, but something I think about sometimes is that within a half-hour drive of this spot on a Sunday morning, so no traffic, within a half-hour drive, there are 500,000 people. And that includes towns like Erie, which is not a cheap place to live, don't get me wrong, but where the population there has expanded dramatically in the last 20 years, quadrupled or more than that. Or in Longmont, where I live, there is a ton of new housing going up. And it's not cheap, but it is a whole lot more accessible than, say, Boulder proper. So I think part of the answer to the question is I really think that despite being called the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder, where it's not that we're just serving Boulder, it's a much wider area.
I think I heard also in that question, is it ethical for being a liberal church that promotes dignity and equity and all of those things of all people? Is it actually okay to be in a place that is, because of the cost of living, somewhat forcing a sense that some people can have some things that other people can't? And it's interesting because I think Boulder's actually a place that has a lot of movements toward doing things that promote equity amongst various people. And so I think part of why we would be in a community that is more well off is because then you actually have the money to fund those social programs that you wish could be universal. Things like universal basic income, which Boulder had a pilot program and still is trying to have one, or the affordable housing stuff that we have in Boulder, all of the various social programs that are more locally oriented, those are funded by taxes that are done locally. And I also think that sometimes we forget in Boulder City and in the county that there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of money. And they're able to be here because of those programs that assist with housing and that assist with various things. And we have a ton of mobile home parks around the area that serve those less financially sound communities.
And we have a huge range of sort of income brackets in the congregation. And like, I think a lot of that doesn't feel directly visible, like on a Sunday morning, because the culture out here is that people with money dress really casually and everyone, is more or less presentable on a Sunday morning. So I think some of it also just gets erased, like the diversity of class that's here already.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a ton of wisdom to add to this, because I definitely feel like the story that I have in my head is that Boulder is inaccessible to me, financially speaking. I don't know if that's really true or not, because I'm unaware of a lot of things that Rachel talked about. My husband and I live in a 1,000 square foot townhouse in Westminster, so I'm a person like David described who drives, half an hour to get here on a Sunday morning. So I don't know. I think this is a really curious question. I think Rachel's framing is really important. I think the sort of ethical question of what do we as a congregation spend money on and for what reasons, I think is really important. I think the Share Our Plate program is really important, and I think that is a really central part of living our values and making sure that, there are some churches that just do an offering every Sunday that is like, we need your money and we need it coming in all the time. And I think that's a really important way that we're constantly engaging with community partners who are doing really important work, and that we're not just saying, well, we have money and we'll help you. It's not like saviorism. It's definitely, when people suggest community partners for Share Your Plate, it's usually because they're already volunteering with those organizations and they know what's happening from the inside because they're there. Volunteering, showing up, they know the work that's happening, and they say, I work with this group on a regular basis and we need X because I see it and it's happening, like TP Raisers, or the food pantry, or, some of these very tangible, very real things. And we say, yes, we're going to send volunteers. If you need something, let us know. If you need us to collect supplies, let us know. And we're going to set up this Share the Plate once a month so that we can support you, so that you can decide what you need to do with the money. And that feels really important too, that we're not just asking congregants, like in a pledge drive, give us money, but that we're also saying, if you have something to spare, let's make sure that it's also going back out into the community, so that we're not just kind of sitting here, like the little church on the hill, like hoarding our dollars, and, that we're also doing, like we say when we take the offering, like doing tangible work to make the world a better place. Like that, I think, speaks to what you said too about like that we're not just like plopped here, like hidden in this little neighborhood, but that we're really trying to do something.
Yeah.
Good question.
Good answers.